Greetings. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today, I'm in conversation with Muchadeyi Masunda, an attorney and international commercial and sports arbitrator. If you enjoy this conversation, remember to subscribe, to like, and to share. Let's get down to some work.
One waits with bated breath to see if the person that Blessed Mhlanga interviewed, namely Blessed Ncube, is also going to be subjected to the same sort of treatment. And then, of course, Gideon Gono is believed to have weighed in and provided plasma TVs for the judges. When it comes to occupying certain positions, be it president of the country, mayor of this capital city or any other city, it's a perpetual relay race.
Muchadeyi Masunda, popularly known as Much Masunda, welcome to In Conversation.
I'm delighted that at long last I'm having a physical, face-to-face interview with you, and I hope you're not going to subject me to gratuitous abuse as you've been wont to do since the last, I don't know how many years that I've known you.
We've known each other for a long time, Much. You have been a mentor to me. You mean a lot to us. So I'm actually absolutely delighted that for the first time we're meeting face to face on In Conversation. We had two virtual meetings. But we meet Much, maybe before I go there, just to share with the viewers that we're very excited. We're currently sitting on 10.5 million views and growing very rapidly, sitting on 82.7 thousand subscribers. So remember to subscribe, to like and share, and keep the comments going. Let's keep on engaging. We meet Much at a time when, just this morning, our colleague, Blessed Mhlanga, was arrested. He handed himself over to the police yesterday after the police had been making some noises about wanting to interview him. What's your reaction to this kind of treatment of journalists?
It's a very sad and disturbing development, because it strikes at the very root of an important facet of any democratic state, which is freedom of expression. And I think it's, I don't know, what it is that has actually happened. Maybe it's a bit sub-judicial for anyone to comment at this stage, but one hopes that justice will prevail. And but one thing that we must never ever lose sight of is that there are four pillars of good governance and democracy. And the proverbial fourth estate constitutes one of those four pillars. And the journalists have a particularly important and pivotal role to play in society, because they keep a check on the other three pillars of governance and democracy, namely the executive that comes out of the legislature itself, and the judiciary. And the fourth estate is the only one of those four pillars that has, from time immemorial, been entrusted with that very important role. So in this particular instance, what is of concern to me is that Blessed Mhlanga was in the course of his duties as a journalist, and his duty is to gather information and disseminate information to the members of society on matters that are of topical interest. So one waits with bated breath to see if the person that Blessed Mhlanga interviewed, namely Blessed Ncube, is also going to be subjected to the same sort of treatment, and if so, the grounds upon which he's going to be prosecuted.
Do you get the sense? I mean, we are 40, how many years?
45.
45 years as an political independent country, that we actually value the significance, the role of the fourth estate, as you've just explained now. Do we give it the role that it should have?
We keep getting mixed signals. There are times when we appear to be on course in terms of giving due respect and taking due cognizance of the role that the media has to play. But now and again, we have instances where there appears to be the selective application of the law, and that is untenable. Going forward.
Much, you are also the chairman of the AMH Editorial Advisory Board. In this role, if you could just explain as briefly as possible what this role entails. I mean, this is not what we're going to talk about, but we can't avoid not talking about it with blessed insight. What's your view of the state of the profession itself? This fourth estate, what position is it in? What's its bill of health?
Well, first and foremost, at the risk of making you blush, I must congratulate you for this decision that you made way back in 2017, when the Independent Editorial Advisory Board of Trustees came into existence, because you relinquished whatever control you may have had in the past on the titles that are published under the auspices of Alpha Media Holdings, which is a company that you established. And that couldn't have been easy, because you had morphed from being an investigative journalist in your own right to management, and you became the chief executive and now executive chairman. And it can't be easy because this was unprecedented. I'm not aware of any media house in the whole of Southern Africa, if not the whole of Africa, that has ever done this, to actually hand over the control of the editorial content of there were 3-4 titles: Newsday, Zimind, and Standard, as well as the Southern Eye, and trust that responsibility to the hands of independent group of people, 6 of us, and now we have a situation that has worked out extremely well, during the last 5-6 years that we've been in existence, where the editor-in-chief and his team, they are accountable to that independent editorial board of advisory board of trustees, as opposed to management team. So that gives them an even freer hand to report on matters that are of interest to the reading public, and I think that was a very strategic and courageous move that you made, and that's, in my view, has gone a long way towards actually strengthening the members of the Fourth Estate, because in the past, as is the case with a number of other media houses, where journalists feel constrained, to cover certain matters that are of topical interest to the unsuspecting members of the public. And they refrain from actually covering or giving coverage to matters that could be uncomfortably close to the bone as far as the beneficial owners of that media house are concerned. Whereas in this instance, I mean, the journalists have had occasion to cover all sorts of matters, as long as a matter is of public interest, Absolutely. Which is really what the members of the proverbial Fourth Estate should focus on.
Absolutely. Much, the reason why actually you and I decided to sit down and talk is because of this huge responsibility that you've taken upon yourselves. Simba Makoni, David Coulter, and others, which is, and you've produced a document called the Constitutional Hill Global Guidelines on Apex Court Appointments. In the first instance, what motivated, what informed this work?
Yeah, we are privileged, to be members of an international think tank, which is based in Barcelona, Spain, and that think tank has was established around 2012 to look at how it could be of assistance to not frail or broken states, but states that seem to be heading in that direction. And more so, those states where there was a lot of potential for the situation to be salvaged and those states to be steered in the right sort of direction. And our country, Zimbabwe, fell in that category. Because we have a somewhat curious situation where we have arguably amongst the highest literacy rates, not just in Africa, but in the world. But sometimes when you see certain things happening, you start questioning yourself, why aren't we putting all those literacy skills that we have garnered over the years into use? And in this particular instance, we, especially those of us that have been involved in the legal profession in its various facets, like in my case, this is my 51st year since January 1974. And I was watching with concern, especially in those public spectacles where wannabe judges were being subjected to what was nothing short of cruel and unusual punishment, in those interviews that were open to the public.
I'll press you there. For me, Much, it was not so much the cruel punishment. It was the caliber of people that were being presented as judges. Is that how low the bar has been set? Yes. For me, that was the question. Yes. I thought they deserved the punishment, but should the bar be that low is my question.
Well, yes and no, Trevor. I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But you see, what one needs to appreciate is the eligibility and selection criteria which used to be applied in the appointment of judges pre-independence and immediately after independence. So, yes, in pre-independence and immediately after independence, we had what was arguably one of the strongest judiciaries in Africa and indeed in the world. Because we had luminaries like Enoch Dumbichena, and after him, Anthony Roy Gabe. And those two individuals in particular could hold their own against any jurist
in the world,
anywhere in the world. But you see, what we needed to do was to sit down and come up with selection and eligibility criteria which would work, especially after the advent of Uhuru in April 1980. But as you quite rightly said, there were a number of people that presented themselves as wannabe judges who had no business to be anywhere near those interviews. But again, you do not solve a problem by compounding it. There was also the question of the questions, the type of questions that needed to be crafted and put to all of them.
I see.
Equitably.
Yeah.
As opposed to the members of the Judicial Service Commission who happened to have been chosen to serve on those panels that interviewed the wannabe judges, appearing in certain instances to be unduly harsh or unfair to certain candidates. Because one thing that ought to prevail at all material times is a sense of fairness and a sense of humility, especially on the part of people that are asking the questions. And so to that end, this think tank that David Coulthard, Simba Mukondi, Musa Kika, and I are part of.
Yes, Musa Kika.
We worked closely with the Judicial Service Commission, especially the Executive Secretary, Walter Chikwana, and proposed through him a raft of questions that ought to be put to these candidates, who were presenting themselves as suitable material for appointment onto the bench. And I'm pleased to say that the
is this for future purposes?
No, even for current purposes.
For current purposes.
Was
this under the Zimbabwe Resource Group? Is that the outfit?
That is the name of we call ourselves Zimbabwe Resource Group as part of this IFIT, which stands for integrated transitions, institute rather,
of
for
integrated
integrated
transitions.
transitions, yeah. And we were very pleased that our input, was appreciated. But we needed to go a stage further and make sure that those individuals that respond to adverts that are put out from time to time by the Judicial Service Commission, to invite people who think they fit the bill to replenish the pot, as it were, when judges retire through attrition, through death or removal. We needed to make sure that we come up with the eligibility and selection criteria that would make sense. Not only...
I'm going to stop you there. You needed to come up with an eligibility criteria that made sense. I'm going to stop you so that we take a break. But at home, don't go away. When we come back, Much and I are going to get into the conversation about what are those guidelines like? What were the key recommendations that you put into this document? Because as you said, the executive is important, is hugely important in a democracy. The judiciary, very important, also equally important to keep all of us in this straight and narrow, as it were. So when you come back, we're going to delve into your findings and recommendations. So don't go away. See you on the other side.
Pathetically poor caliber of some of the candidates that offer themselves for consideration for judicial appointment.
Greetings. My name is Trevor Ncube, host of In Conversation with Trevor, Zimbabwe's most engaging conversational show. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. We've brought before your screens change makers from arts, business, and politics, and from the region. Please join our growing community of viewers. Subscribe, like, and share. Welcome back to our conversation with Muchadeyi Masunda, an attorney and international commercial and sports arbitrator, my apologies. So Much, you've put through this document and I've read through it. I'm a lay person reading a legal document, so you'll forgive me when I come across as ignorant in certain instances. So sum this up to us in terms of the significance of this going forward, in terms of how it guides the process of appointing judges, particularly those who are going to be manning the apex, our apex courts. Yeah.
In summary, we really took a very broad helicopter view of what it is that needed to be done. And first and foremost, we felt it would be absolutely imperative for us to talk to retired judges because they've been through the mill and find out from them what it is that they felt needed to be encapsulated in these guidelines. And to that end, we were assisted by, amongst others, the now late Stanford Moyo. And more so, given the role that he had played as president of the Law Society of Zimbabwe, president of the SADC Lawyers Association, and he got elevated to the giddy heights of being president of the International Bar Association. So the input from the likes of Stanford and other retired chief justices in the region, the retired deputy chief justice of South Africa, Ernest Moseneke, and Kate O'Regan, who served on the Constitutional Court in South Africa. So and of course our own Moses Hungwe Chinengo. And so we went through fairly robust Q&As with all those eminent jurists and came out with a set of guidelines that...
Yeah, I'm going to stop you there, Much, because I just want to emphasize the gravitas, the caliber of the people that you've just highlighted some of them. But there are important institutions that are behind this document. Do you want to go there as briefly as possible?
Oh, there are a number of them.
Yale School?
Yale School, law school is a very famous Ivy League university.
The King and Spalding LLP and W Legal Limited, who provided quite a lot of support. Anybody else?
Oh, the Ford Foundation, amongst the Rockefeller Foundation. There were many, but I think what appealed to them most was the long-term impact of the whole exercise, because we felt that especially during the latter years of former President Robert Gabriel Mugabe's term, we're beginning to lose sight of the sort of important criteria that needed to be factored into the equation for anyone to be appointed a judge of the High Court and then go through the ranks, judge of the Supreme Court, and even Constitutional Court. So, because ordinarily, what used to happen in the past, there's no way that anyone, any practicing attorney or advocate could dream of throwing his or her hat into the ring to become a judge unless you distinguished yourself in practice. And let me give an example of Tony Gabe. He would have started practicing as an advocate at the tender age of 24, 25, and distinguished himself as the go-to advocate in Bulawayo, got his silk. And then when you've done just about everything that needed to be done from a practice point of view, you've also sent your kids to school, university, and so forth. And you're now looking towards making an equally telling contribution in the legal profession, but on the bench. Right. So there are no pressures from a financial perspective, because he's made all the money that needed to be made. The house is paid for, there are no mortgage issues. And he's now being recognized by his peers, not only internally, locally, but regionally, continentally, and beyond. So he then becomes a judge of the High Court in Bulawayo, ends up as Deputy Chief Justice to the iconic Enoch Tumbuchena, and eventually became Chief Justice, appointed. His appointment was endorsed, by the way, by Robert Gabriel Mugabe himself, and he served with distinction as Chief Justice for 11 years, and a world-class judge. So you needed to make sure that all those things.
You've gone through the mill.
Yes, you've gone through the mill.
Your colleagues have looked at you. Right. You are admired. You've a track record. You've not put your foot wrong in any way.
Exactly.
And you don't raise your hand.
No.
To say this is what I want to do. So what happened
So what started happening was we started seeing judges that were not as courageous as they ought to be, especially when they had occasion to preside over politically sensitive cases. Because one of the most important attributes of a good judge is courage.
Yeah.
The fearlessness to pronounce what the law is on a given topic. That's one. Two, we started seeing people that had not really...
I'm going to break you again, because I think this is important. So one of the individual criteria of inclusion is this: courage. Each apex court judge must be willing to make rulings that resist majority public opinion, or that defy power, knowing that these may generate personal and professional risks and consequences. That's perhaps one of the most important criteria.
Absolutely. So let's rewind the clock to the time when our mutual friend Gideon Gono was the governor of the central bank. At that time, we started seeing a situation that was potentially calamitous going forward, where judges became beholden to the executive in terms of their remuneration packages. And then, of course, Gideon Gono is believed to have weighed in and provided plasma TVs for the judges, provided the chariots
the cars that they were using
a Merc, obligatory Merc, plus an obligatory 4x4, And in some instances, the judges were recipients of the necessary but chaotically implemented land reform. And so we started seeing split loyalties, as it were, in terms of their commitment to the cause of dispensing justice without fear or favor. So those sort of issues then started creating anxiety amongst us and so forth. Because in the past, there was the Consolidated Revenue Fund, which was managed by Treasury. Treasury is an extension, as you know, of the Ministry of Finance. And it is that institutional arrangement that assured judges of their judicial independence, which is crucial. Now, when we go across the Limpopo and see what the iconic President Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela did, he made sure when he put together, or his administration put together, the Constitutional Court, he made sure that the remuneration for judges was absolutely top-notch. And the judges in South Africa are amongst the most well-paid anywhere in the world. So it eliminates the possibility, however remote, of judges being susceptible to bribery and that sort of thing. And how many times do we hear, these days, Trevor, of people talking about the judiciary being captured? And it all arises from the fact that our judges are not as well remunerated as they should be.
So the perception is out there very strongly that our judges are no longer independent. I mean, our colleague, Blessed Mhlanga, is going to be in front of a magistrate. I mean, it's even worse at that level. And you raise the important point, Much, of the governor facilitating plasma screens, cars, and then the land issue, which should, people being given land, they are entitled to benefit from land reform, but there ought to be a way that makes the public believe that they've not been captured. So one of the recommendations that you make in terms of conditions of service and tenure for the apex courts, you say that remuneration should be, rather this document says remuneration should be benchmarked as a minimum to the most senior executive and legislative branch compensation, and it should be adjusted annually to account for official inflation. I get the sense that for some politicians, I know you're a diplomat, you're not going to be as hard as I am here, that there are some politicians that are comfortable with having magistrates, judges, and judges of the Supreme Court and Constitutional Court at their knees begging for some form of compensation, for some form of accommodation. But this is not what this document is recommending.
Exactly. Because picture a situation, Trevor, where the regional magistrate or senior magistrate would be presiding over Blessed Mhlanga's case. Probably doesn't even have a car for his or her own use.
Or a house, for that matter.
Yeah, I was going to go through all
sure.
Basic things like a chariot, to ferry him or herself from home to work, and the accommodation, the amount of work that judges, magistrates, or any judicial officer have to do. You work punishingly long hours. And how can we have judges, magistrates being accommodated in blocks of flats, like Francis Flats in Belvedere, and the other block of flats along Quindon Road in Sentosa, where the judges are living, next door to other arbitrary civil servants, and the atmosphere is just not conducive to what you would expect.
The status
and that sort of thing. And more so when judges, senior judicial officers, mainly in the magistrates court, because judges are provided with cars, and I'm not so sure if that is the case with other judicial officers. Can you imagine them using the mshika-shikas and public transport system? And they're so vulnerable, to all sorts of pressures. and not being able to send their kids to the sort of schools that they would like to send their kids, and they get subjected to all sorts of ridicule, and which is why it is so important for our executive, as a matter of urgency, to address those remuneration issues. And let's see if we can go back to the halcyon days of pre-independence, where there was this consolidated revenue fund, which was funded by Treasury to meet the needs of people that are in essential services, like the judiciary, and make sure that their needs are met. For instance, the Chief Justice of South Africa, Mandis Muriel Lindelwa Maya, her package is around maybe 4 to 5 million rand a year. That is quite significant.
As it should be.
Yes. And what's more is when the judges reach retirement age in South Africa, they get paid, I believe, whatever the rate was at the time of retirement. So, I don't know if you've had occasion to meet retired Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang and
Muchadeyi, yeah.
He's content, he's
comfortable,
happy, and he's continuing to make a contribution towards,
and playing his golf,
playing his part, yes, and also playing his part as a respected, albeit retired Deputy Chief Justice.
But that's it. I'm trying to find a way of saying it, because our society and the makeup of our political structure is such that politicians don't seem to want to have that these members of a society who are doing such wonderful work, such important work, much more important than politicians, must be respected by society. Their remuneration, their standard of living, their protection, their status, and so forth. They would rather want to break them down.
Exactly. I'll just give you an example. I don't like talking about these things in the air. The former, now late Chief Justice Enoch Dumbuchena, upon retirement, the support systems that he used to enjoy just disappeared. And my PA, Mrs. Jeanine Robertson Silas Cahill, ended up at my behest providing secretarial services to former Chief Justice Dumbuchena. And we also, she performed a similar role to other senior judges that retired after Dumbuchena.
Because the system does not respect them enough to give them the support.
Yeah.
So they're being punished for the role they played.
And it doesn't cost, it wouldn't cost the fiscus an arm.
But that's not the point. It's just, we're going to fix you.
Think about it and provide. Like, for instance, a person who would have occupied those giddy heights as the head of the judiciary of the Republic of Zimbabwe, the moment that person ceases to hold that position, all the support, it's like taking away the crutches from her.
What does this say to a Trevor Ncube whose ambitions to be a Chief Justice, to a judge who is sitting there, a magistrate? It says, if I want to be successful in the eyes of the politician, I got to play by their rules. Play ball. Yes, I can't be independent. Otherwise, I'll be like Justice Dumbuchena. Is that not the message you're sending out?
That is precisely the message that is sent across, conveyed. And as a result, the individuals that would make excellent Chief Justices or judges of the Supreme Court or Constitutional Court, they stay away from. And that it then answers the question that you posed earlier about the pathetically poor caliber of some of the candidates that offer themselves for consideration for judicial appointment.
We're going to take a break there. You took the break and not me, but I want us to come back there and ask the question, what's the effect of that on the application of the law? What's the effect that on our society as a whole? And then maybe wrap up this conversation and go to your favorite, which is local government. So don't go away. When we come back, we're going to go to that place about the impact of not giving the judges the status that they deserve, magistrates the status that they deserve. What's the impact of that to our entire society? See you on the other side.
It doesn't matter how much we wax lyrical about Zimbabwe being open for business. When people come here, the investors, that is, one of the first things they ask is, how strong is the judicial?
Welcome back to our conversation with Muchadeyi Masunda, an attorney and international commercial and sports arbitrator. Just to say thank you again for 10.5 million views, 82.7 thousand subscribers. We're very grateful. Keep the comments coming, keep engaged. We appreciate that. Much when we took the break, you were going to take us to that place that sort of sums it up and says, what's the impact of having a judiciary, magistrates, judges of the apex courts who don't feel independent and where we're actually not getting the best because the best might be shying away because of the conditions of service, because of the lack of respect, because of the sense that they are beholden to the political powers. What's the impact of that on the judgments that we see coming out of our courts?
I think the most devastating impact, Trevor, is the lack of faith that the members of the public have in the court system. Because they need to remain at all material times imbued with that sense of justice, that if I go to court, if I have a spat with Trevor Ncube or anybody for that matter, I will get my day in court. But in this instance, you get, we start seeing a proliferation of partisan judgments. Or in certain instances, people just shying away, finding every conceivable excuse in the book as to why a given judicial officer would not want to preside over a given matter. And so it goes on. It seriously undermines the independence of the judiciary, which is a critical, I can't even overemphasize how important that is. And when that happens, it doesn't matter how much we wax lyrical about Zimbabwe being open for business. When people come here, the investors, that is, one of the first things they ask is, how strong is the judiciary? What would happen in the event that I have a spat with one of my local partners? How long is it going to take before the dispute is resolved? And this is where in the early 90s, 92, we came up with this concept of an alternative dispute resolution, which culminated in the establishment of the Commercial Arbitration Center.
I want us to park that one there, because it's an important one. But so you asked this important question. An investor asks you, what's going to happen if I'm involved in a spat with my local partners and so forth? What answers do you give to that?
Well, the investors actually would be asking that question almost tongue-in-cheek, because they can see the graphic evidence before them on the basis of what has happened to other investors. Then they just say, this is a no-go area. But it's a combination of factors.
So we complain, Muj. So it's a contradictory position. We claim in a very baseless, Zimbabwe is often open for business. We know it is not open for business. And then your judiciary is delivering judgments that undermine your claim that you're open for business. Talk to me, what's happening here?
Yeah. So that then ends up, the long and short of all that is that the investors just go elsewhere. Because we're not the only country, by the way, that is as well endowed as we are in terms of natural resources. People got a choice to go all over the place.
So, Much, the serious investors go elsewhere.
Yes, they do.
The crooks come here because the crooks know that the crooks from Belarus, from Russia, from wherever, then come to Zimbabwe because they know if I'm aligned to the political ruling class, I'm okay. Right. And then we see the headlines of mega deals, which never result in any mega thing, coming to our country.
That's precisely what. And then it's a combination of other factors that we might not even have time to talk about here. Because an investor comes in, says, what is the state of the judiciary? And they get the sort of answers that we've spoken about. Next thing, investor comes in, other issue that is of serious importance to a lot of investors. When I do eventually invest and send my expatriate staff to Zimbabwe, where are their children going to go to school? What happens if they fall sick or any member of the family falls sick? Are the hospitals up to speed? Is the City of Harare providing or playing its part to make the city livable? Because most of the economic and industrial activity, Trevor, meaningful economic and industrial activity, it happens in urban areas or peri-urban
So
areas.
it's a cocktail of militating factors that drive away investors.
Yeah, which is why I've always made the point, and I'd like to make that point to you and your faithful viewers, that when it comes to occupying certain positions, be it president of the country, mayor of this capital city or any other city, it's a perpetual relay race. You need to do your bit to the best of your ability during that time that you're in office. And anyone else who comes in after you picks up that...
builds upon what you've built.
And going forward. The moment we take our eyes off the ball, like we did in the heady days of early independence, where you had all sorts of people at townhouse there who had no business to be there whatsoever. Because once things grind to a shuddering halt, for whatever reason, mainly through incompetence or failure to appreciate what it is that needs to be done, then anyone who comes in after that will be playing catch up. And then when they go back again to where we were, and so it goes on. And then before we anyone says Jack Robinson, we have taken one step forward and two steps backward.
And we struggle to catch up all the time.
And the cumulative impact of all that, is regression in our economy.
My last question on this: how seriously has this been taken within the corridors of power? Do you get a sense it's being embraced? Do you get a sense it?
Yes, I
because it's an international document that really ought to resonate with us, isn't it?
In fact, it's interesting you should say, especially make the point that you made last about the international appeal. Do you know that there are countries, Trevor, the Philippines, for instance, they actually embraced these global guidelines, lock, stock, and barrel, and they said, well, this is just what the doctor ordered.
What about us? What about Zimbabwe?
Well, let me put it this way. I had occasion to be a keynote speaker at the last winter school of the Law Society in November in Charlottenburg, and the document was well received. Okay. And well received not just by the members of the Law Society, but by some members of the Judicial Service Commission, and notably Walter Chikwana, the Executive Secretary, because he was also a guest speaker. And we had a fairly robust Q&A session involving him, myself, and others. So I would say, touch wood, we're on the right track. And what remains now is for us, to market the guidelines at the highest level possible. And we're fortunate to have more than our fair share of lawyers in key positions in government, and starting obviously with the Judicial Service Commission.
Well, we'll be watching the space. Let's move over now to you're the founder, correct me if I'm wrong, founder and executive director of the Zimbabwe Commercial Arbitration Center of Zimbabwe. Am I right?
Yes, correct. There were about 6 of us that set it up, and notable names like, Advocate Adrian Philip de Bourbon, Advocate Tony Macmillan, both of them were Silks. Then Ian Anthony Donovan, a senior advocate. Michael James Gillespie, who went on to become a judge, and one of the better judges that we had. Bharat Patel, who is the current judge of the Constitutional Court, and myself. But the interesting thread amongst the 6 of us is that 4 of us were at law school together. Ian Donovan, Mike Gillespie, Bharat Patel, and myself. And the other 2 older topies had made a mark for themselves. Tony Macmillan was the Solicitor General, even way after, April 1980.
What was the thinking behind setting the commercial arbitration?
The whole idea, it also spills over from the things that we've already discussed. We realized that we had fallen horribly behind in terms of getting the Arbitration Act to be in sync with what was happening in other parts of the progressive world. The Arbitration Act that was still in place, in situ, was the act that had been cribbed from the English legal system as far back as 1885. And it had not been updated in any way. So in one quantum leap, after all the work that the 6 of us did, we got what is now the Arbitration Act of 1996. Can you imagine the quantum leap from 1885 piece of legislation to 1996, embracing the UNCITRAL model law. UNCITRAL is the acronym for United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, because a lot of work had been done there. Internationally, meetings were taking place on a regular basis at the UNCITRAL headquarters in Vienna, Austria, to make sure that the representatives of various countries and regions would sit together in a joint endeavor to harmonize commercial laws in given countries, and company law and so forth, so that we end up with this UNCITRAL model law, which is the basis upon which we have the current Arbitration Act of 1996. So, give you an example. If the Ford Motor Company comes here, or they're already here anyway, they've been here since Grandma fell off the bus, having Dooley's as the franchisee here. So if, say, there's a dispute between the Ford Motor Company and Dooley's, and somebody acting for the Ford Motor Company says, what kind of arbitration act has Zimbabwe got if there's an arbitration clause in the agreement? The moment you say it's an UNCITRAL model law based, very comfortable, tick, right? So the second thing, is Zimbabwe a signatory to the 1958 New York Convention? Tick.
But you raise, and I must raise a point here. So our judiciary is not kosher, as we and I have discussed. There's question marks.
Oh, it's not as kosher as it
should be. Yeah. So how does that judiciary, which is not as kosher as we want it to be, how does it interact with the Commercial Arbitration Center? Do I need to choose one, or what's the process?
Trevor, it's a very good question that you ask. And the long and short of it is that we were very lucky that this initiative to go the alternative dispute resolution route and end up with the Arbitration Act that's in place was fully supported by the then Chief Justice, Enoch Dumbuchena, and the successor, Tony Gabe. And as a result of the support that we got from those two eminent jurists, there was a realization and an acceptance that the Commercial Arbitration Center is not going to be a competitor of the judiciary, but will be rendering complementary services. Complementary with an E, not I. This would be my usual fussy self. And so we've had tremendous support. In fact, if I were to favor you with copies of High Court and Supreme Court judgments in arbitration cases that have had occasion to end up in those fora, you'll be pleasantly surprised to see the support that we have had, from the judiciary. Only last week, there was a case in the paper, you probably picked it up, it was in one of the daily newspapers, where one party, a prominent politician and businessman, chose, in spite of the fact that there was an arbitration clause that said, go to the Commercial Arbitration Center to have your disputes resolved. You chose to go to the High Court. Mm-hmm. And the High Court just says, we're not jurisdiction.
All right.
Your first port of call is Commercial Arbitration Center.
Beautiful.
That's what you provided for in your agreement. So it's respect of the contractual obligations that arise from what two parties have decided to encapsulate in a contract.
One of we must round up. Sadly, time is not always on our side. We must round up. One of the things that you're pretty passionate about, I mean, apart from the fact, rather highlighted by the fact that you were mayor of the city from 2008 to 2013, is local government, local authorities. In terms of the way they deliver services to the public. You actually got honored in 2012 with the UN Habitat Scroll for your role in providing charismatic leadership and courageous promotion of ethical governance as the mayor of Harare. In a nutshell, what's your sense of the state of affairs in our local government, Bulawayo, Harare, Mutare, Kwekwe, Kadoma?
There are pockets of excellence here and there. David Coulter is doing a magnificent job in Bulawayo against all sorts of odds. We've seen more chaos than should have been the case in Harare, because we had I've lost count now of how many mayors we had in an incredibly short space of time. In a nutshell, Trevor, I think what we need to do is this. We need to stop playing the blame game, right? And focus on other possible solutions in terms of the way forward. Okay. We have a situation where the legislators at local government level and central government level, one thing they have that you and I don't have is courage. They lift their hands up every election time. I want to stand for, vote for in Bare or whatever. They get elected. And in a lot of instances, the people that ought to make themselves available shy away because of a number of reasons that we needn't go into here. But what we need them to do is, because see, there are certain things that have always been an integral part of any community. I mean, you were born and brought up in Bulawayo, Makwegwe, and all that. Employer is a classic example of what I want to say. There's no way in Bulawayo of old, and even more recently actually, where you could just wake up one day and say, I want to be mayor of Bulawayo. There were those invisible old men in grey suits who would discuss among themselves across the party political lines, and then agree that, yes, this person has got what it takes to aspire to become mayor. He's got the gravitas, he's got everything else. But unfortunately, that sort of thing did not happen in Salisbury and now Harare. So we've seen a proliferation of all sorts of arbitrary individuals, coming forth and saying, I can do it, Tambika, whatever township lingo they choose to do. But what we need to do, and which is what I'm working on quietly behind the scenes, is to say, all right, these are the courageous people that have put themselves forward. So let's find mechanisms and stratagems that can work for the city going forward without undermining their authority, and make them take ownership of all those things that are going to be implemented. It can be done. Because one thing that is often overlooked, Trevor, I've said this so many times and I'll say it again, City of Harare, by virtue of the nature and scale of its multi-billion US dollars worth of operations, is the second largest business enterprise in the country, second to government. If Harare works, the Zimbabwe works. But now we have had a situation as characterized by this commission of inquiry into governance issues.
Unbelievable stuff coming out of that. Depressing, actually.
Very. So just, I know we're pressed for time, but let me give you an example. We have a huge number of bright sparks that are churned out by how many institutions of higher and tertiary education? Maybe 13?
Yeah.
So what we need to do is to resuscitate these vocational scholarships that we used to have in the past in all the bigger cities. Simbarashi Mangongwende is a product of that. One of the best electrical engineers in the world, a consultant to the World Bank and other international organizations. So if we do that and have kids going through all these institutions of higher and tertiary education, and then they get, to use that ugly word, bonded to the city for the duration during which their studies were.
And apprenticeships.
Right. That's what used to happen in the past. I mean, City Electrical Engineers Department was a fully fledged department under the city.
ZESA produced some of the amazing engineers.
Those were the basis, the genesis of all that was City Electrical Engineering Department in Bulawayo, in Harare, and so forth. And so when these kids come in, then they're encouraged to you're killing X number of birds with one stone. Immediate employment for these graduates, medicine doctors. City of Harare provides the biggest health service to the city. 2 hospitals, 14 polyclinics, over 800 babies delivered in those polyclinics every month. And now we're sitting back and doing very precious little. In the meantime, we have had to incorporate or absorb into Greater Harare, Caledonia, and Stone Ridge, and all those places that are sprouting all over the place. Do you realize, Trevor, that Caledonia on its own has got more people than, according to statistics, more people than the whole of Pindura? So it's a time bomb.
Yeah.
So what we need to be working on now rather than later is convert the polyclinic that serves the needs of our people that live in Mapuku and Tavara into a provincial hospital, and do the same with other areas where there's the south, especially Stone Ridge and Southley Park and all those places. And we mustn't wait until we've got a crisis on our hands.
How do we do that, Much? How do we do that?
We get these kids that are like I mentioned, that they come out armed with law degrees or accounting degrees or whatever. The accounting degree guys, City Treasurer's Department, and they get groomed there. They write the exam, municipal managers, treasurers or managers, whatever. Those that want to become town clerks, they will do the municipal managers' diplomas or courses or whatever. And the ones that want to end up a city treasurer or finance director.
And we make sure we get the best,
yes.
Not Trevor's relatives,
exactly.
family and friends.
Yeah. And so the same thing with the legal beavers. You could carve out a meaningful career as an appendage to the Chamber Secretary's department.
Much I must go to your decision plus Christy Bourbon and others. That
and Chris Anderson was also
Chris
involved.
Anderson, yeah.
Quietly,
that to me says this is initiative of concerned citizens who actually do something that is long-lasting, which becomes a legacy of the country. Commercial Arbitration Center. What you are talking about here is perhaps another bigger initiative, how to rescue the city council from the current malfeasance that it is enduring. And hopefully somebody out there is listening to this and thinking, maybe we can jump in and do something. But I want to pose it to you a much more bigger issue that's going to get into trouble. Zimbabwe is in a mess. And some of us are saying elections is not the way to go. The opposition is broken. The ruling party is broken. Maybe we ought to be looking at a pause, a sabbatical, and have a National Transitional Authority, whereupon anybody who is involved in giving life to the National Transitional Authority rules themselves out from running. So the National Transitional Authority is charged with the responsibility of ensuring that these kind of things that you've been talking about, the country works, the institutions works, the documents of this nature in terms of where we get the best to serve our society are implemented. Does that seduce you in any way in terms of rescuing us from where we are now?
Well, in terms of where we are, Trevor, that would be the most eminently sensible thing to do. Because I talked earlier about pockets of excellence. Now, if we were to get like-minded individuals who would take it upon themselves, and stop being keyboard warriors and fireside warriors, and say, right, guys, we've got a problem here. We've got the intellectual capacity, thanks to the educational system that was there pre and post-independence. So we've identified the problem. Let's throw resources towards getting a sustainable solution to that problem. So if we were to do that in various pockets of and establish pockets of
society,
then we'll be able away and forget about the party political elections for maybe, I would say, for not less than 10 years, because given the state in which we are, and there are many individuals out there, Trevor, who are as fired up as you and I are about these issues, who would be quite happy to say, right, I'll make a contribution on the clear understanding that I am not going to get sucked into party politics.
Absolutely.
When we fix the problem and the hospitals are working, the schools are working, and the roads are in place. And talking about roads, just to digress a bit, the total, in terms of roads network for Greater Harare, it's in excess of 10,000 kilometers, which is more than the whole of the DRC. And during my stint as mayor, there was no Zinara then. If it was there, it had nothing to do with the collection of the motor vehicle licensing fees. Every 4 months, my administration would raise between 14 and 16 million, US dollars. And all that was channeled towards Engineer Philip Mabingo Fukwa and his team to maintain the roads. And during my stint, I'm proud to say that potholes were unheard of.
Tell me, is there anything that you would do differently? Were you given a second bite of the cherry as mayor of Harare? Is there anything that you regret you didn't do? Is there anything you'd do differently?
Not really. I'll pick up the pieces from where I'd left off. And for instance, there was that $5 million US that we got from the Bill and Melinda Gates,
which never came.
It came.
It came. Okay.
And if you go to the Oraseko extension today, you will see 486 houses that were built out of that money.
Okay.
And as I was finishing my term, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, happy that we had accounted for all that money right out the last time. They said, look, Mayor, this is unheard of. We've never seen anything like this. Here's another 20 million. But this time, we're going to channel it through the building societies, mortgage finance. And they said, does your country have the capacity to do that? I said, try me. So they sent a guy who'd written tomes on mortgage financing facility, Frank Smith from Haiti. He came here. I made sure, those days I was chairman of Miko's group. I made sure he got the best suite at Miko's Hotel and got hold of our mutual friend, Kevin Terry, who was managing director of CABS. And I was also chairman of Old Mutual then, so it worked out nicely. And I said, Trevor, Kevin, I'm blissfully ignorant about. I'm playing ignorance to this guy here. You mobilize your other guys, because Kevin was chairman of the Association of Building Societies. So there was Beverly Building Society, there was
CABS Building Society,
and there was Zimbabwe Building Society, and so forth. So they met this guy, and the guy was gobsmacked. He went back to Seattle.
Did the money come in?
The money was made available,
but
on a use it or lose it basis. So I exited. My successors, I won't mention names, I won't embarrass anybody, they took their eyes off the ball.
$20 million.
$20 million, which was going to be channeled through the building societies to the targeted beneficiaries who were members of the Zimbabwe Homeless People's Federation. The whole idea, Trevor, was to raise all those unsightly 55 blocks of flats in Harare, where our people live under the most squalid of conditions that you can think of. But for you, me, or anybody to persuade those people to move out of those, you've got to be able to
something
point
better.
To something that we're moving you out of here to move into that prototype house. So that was the whole plan, and I don't think organizations such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, amongst others, would be averse to this sort of thing being resuscitated. As long as you've got the right people at the helm
integrity
of whatever it is that is being done. Yeah.
But let's go to books, Much, I want to share this book with a lot of people. A personal history of Catherine Graham. Catherine Graham inherited the Washington Post from her father, but her father decided that she didn't have the experience, but instead her husband should run the Washington Post, the Washington Post. Most of the things I've done as a publisher, I learned from this book. I read books to learn and not to entertain myself. So what she did, which for me has informed the way I've been involved in journalism, is that her husband wanted to have the limelight in Washington. So he was into wining and dining politicians, and he used the Washington Post to advance his interests. When she came in, she did the opposite. Watergate was broken under her watch.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Because she gave the journalist free rein. She said, what my husband used to do, I will not do. This is a national institution. The Washington Post is a national institution, and I'm holding it in trust for everybody. So I do what I do, largely informed by what she did. I had to make a choice. Do I do what her husband did, or do I do what she did? And I was fully convinced that my principles and values were, do not interfere. You simply create an enabling environment, and you have an editorial advisory board.
That's evidence, testimony of.
And you have retired Chief Justice Chinengo as an ombudsman, and you don't have to get involved. So this book has been hugely important to me.
Right.
And The Team of Rivals, again, I recommend this. This is an amazing book about how Abraham Lincoln, you might disagree with some of his political views, but great book. This is a book that I recommend for young people like you, Creating the Good Life, applying Aristotle's wisdom to find meaning and happiness. This is from success to significance, which is the kind of stuff that you are doing, Muchadeyi Masunda. I know you read. What books would you want to recommend to our book-loving viewers out there?
Well, I've been a voracious reader, Trevor, from age 15. Those days I used to confine myself mainly to books about the budding nationalists in the region, Robert Sobuk, Mangaliso Sobuk, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, and of course locally, Joshua Mqabu, Nyongolo Nkoma, and all that. And the other things that used to fascinate me was a series that used to be published because of that crisis in the DRC. There was an author, I can't remember his name now, he used to write, books with publications with eye-catching titles like 100 Days in Elizabethville, which is now Lubumbashi.
Yeah.
100 days in Leopoldville, which is now Kinshasa. 100 days in Stanleyville, which is now Kisangani. But essentially, it was capturing what was happening with the forced exodus of people because of the civil unrest and commotion and so forth.
Do you remember the name of the author?
I can't remember the name of the author. I think it was David Burke, you know. But anyway, then I read the history of the Khama dynasty in Botswana. You know, it was written by Sekedi Khama, who was, I think at the time, a regent of sorts. But the other book that I read, which inspired me a lot, was The Reach for the Sky. It was all to do with this legless pilot, you know, during the World War II. I think it was Douglas Bader, B-A-D-E-R. But in later life, I devoted a lot of my energies on books to do with the economic and industrial development of Africa. You know, Martin Meredith, you know, the history of Africa and the publications from the Brentest Foundation, like Why Africa is Poor and What We Africans Can and Should Do About It. But the one that really left an indelible impression on my mind is the Singapore story, by the founding father of Singapore,
Lee Kuan Yew.
Lee Kuan Yew, and more popularly known by his initials, you know, LKY. And that's where you see meritocracy at play. And to look at Singapore, Trevor, as you know, I'm sure you've been there, and I've been there quite a number of times. They've got no resources to talk of. Zero, nada.
City-state.
It's a city-state, yeah. Natural resources, nada, zero. But they punch well above their weight. And I've had occasion to interact with delegations from Singapore, especially in the last 3 years of my stint as mayor of Harare. I got elected president of Mayors for Africa and representing Africa on the world stage. And as fate would have it, the substantive president, who was then the mayor of Istanbul in Turkey, he was not always available to attend certain meetings, all over the world. So he just chose me to stand in for him. So I would go to high-level meetings with Ban Ki-moon's team and meet these Singaporean delegates. They were just amazing. There was no question of the delegation being bloated with a lot of hangers-on. And the guys were so modest,
professionals,
very focused, and that's when we all had the privilege of rubbing shoulders and working with Amina Mohammed, the current Deputy Secretary General of the UN, this Nigerian lady, amazing lady, You and
I could go on and on. Thank you so much. I'm going to embarrass you and say, as I was driving to come and have this conversation with you, I was saying, wouldn't it be amazing if Muchadeyi Masunda was Zimbabwe's Chief Justice? Wow. But he isn't. Much, thank you so much.
Just as well, I don't blush. Because I'm almost, I'm an endangered species, Trevor. I'm over the hill. I'm 73,
But we need your experience. We need your wisdom. That white hair needs to work some more. Much, thank you so much for creating the time. I don't take your availability for granted. So thank you so much. Allow me, Much, to face our viewers all over the world to say thank you so much for your support. We are so grateful for that 10.5 million views. 82.7 thousand subscribers and still going. Thank you so much. And we love the engagement. We love the comments. We take the criticism on the chin and we grow. So thank you so much for being engaged. Remember, we are out every Monday, 7 a.m. Central African time on YouTube. For your viewing and listening pleasure, scroll down this video. You'll find links for podcasts and for more similar episodes on YouTube. We are big on Instagram, on TikTok, For those who want brief clips, we value your support. Remember to subscribe, to like, and share. Until next time, cheers to you all.